Hello again to another Agricultural Reaction. Today we will be watching how fresh is the fish at your grocery store. So recently I learned that, let's say, the fish in sushi have to be like a flash frozen because they are parasite in pretty much every fish in the world. There is no way that you can, there is a fish without parasites. That's what I learned from internet, so don't take my word for it. So I was because I kind of like sushi, and I like as well just fish and shellfish as well. So, and we kind of like learned recently we have a bit of a, like health issues, and we're not getting any younger, so we're trying to eat a bit healthier. So a lot of fish is in our diet. Maybe not a lot, but there's more fish than it used to be, and a lot more of the shell, like prawns and stuff as well. Our new favorite dish is a bit of a stir fry with prawns, garlic and herb prawns with udon noodles and broccoli in sesame oil. Delicious Italian. Anyway, I came across this video of how fresh is the fish at your grocery store, and I'm kind of thinking, you know what, that's a good idea. I would like to learn that, because that would be kind of a good idea to just know, and it is as well. What's going on here? Something's happening with my computer. That's not good. Here, okay, that's working, this is working, that's working, cool. And it's from Minute Food, so let's just jump into it and see how fresh is the fish, because I'm kind of thinking that, I don't know, let's just see.
Okay, we have got to talk about the F word. No, not that one. Frozen. Because when it comes to fish, frozen might as well be a bad word. People do not want to buy or eat frozen fish.
I actually rather frozen fish, because usually if I buy fresh fish, I kind of like, I forget it and it just goes bad. And frozen fish is just, usually it's just ready to cook from the frozen. So this is what we actually buy. We buy, maybe not simply skinless fillets from Better Fish, but we are getting fillets from like a salmon, because salmon is good for people with high cholesterol, and it's frozen, so yeah.
The research is really clear on that, but it's also really clear that this preference is total bull.
Yeah.
Sorry, that one was all.
Yeah, okay. So basically what I know is as well that if you buy frozen fish, frozen fruit, vegetables and stuff like that, you're actually buying better quality, because most of the time when something is made to be frozen, it's frozen at its peak. While let's say stuff that it's like, especially with vegetables and fruits, if they have to gonna be sold fresh, they are most of the time picked underripe, and then they be, like in different, before it actually get to your store, it's gonna take luckily, you're gonna be lucky if it's just only a few days, not months. That happens.
Let's dive in, shall we? This is Minute Food. Now,
Food?
if you're in a position to get your fish
food.
right off the boat or even catch it yourself, this video isn't necessarily meant for you. Although you should watch it anyway, because it's awesome. This is going to be most relevant to those of you who, like me, buy their fish at a grocery store or a market. I'm also coming from a mostly US perspective here, although obviously the underlying science holds true no matter where you are. So now that we've gotten the official disclaimers out of the way, we can get to the good stuff. Researchers and marketers and basically everyone else who has asked the question have found that people are much more likely to buy fresh, like unfrozen fish, than frozen fish. Their reasoning is that it's healthier, better quality, and, well, fresher than the frozen stuff. In fact, if you tell people that the fish they're eating had been frozen, they will rate it as less delicious. Our distaste for frozen fish is grounded in reality. Even as recently as a few decades ago, if the fish that came in didn't sell, retailers would freeze it just before it went bad and then sell it as frozen. What's more, old school freezing technology froze the fish pretty slowly. And remember our video on freezing stuff? The slower something freezes, the larger the ice crystals inside and the more damage they do to the food. So people, rightfully, got it in their heads that frozen fish sucked. But a lot can change in a few decades, and these days, frozen fish is often just as fresh, and sometimes even fresher, than fresh fish, which seems like it makes no sense. But let's talk about what it actually means for food to be fresh. Like, check out this kale. You would never call it fresh, right? Because for most foods, we use the word fresh to mean that something is in tip-top condition to eat. But with seafood, people generally use the term fresh to indicate that something hasn't been frozen. And it turns out that fish being fresh in the not frozen sense has very little to do with whether it's fresh in the quality sense. Consider how this never frozen fish fillet got to your grocery store. After getting caught out on the water, maybe way out on the water, it had to get back to shore, then to a processing facility to be cleaned and gutted and filleted. Then it had to make its way, probably a significant distance, since the vast majority of the seafood we eat in the US comes from abroad, all the way to your store. I did a lot of digging to find out how long this whole process actually takes, and although it depends on all sorts of factors, the answer is somewhere between 3 and 20 days.
It's long.
Yeah, almost 3 weeks. And we're not just talking inland locations here. Because of our dependence on imported seafood, this is often the case even in coastal cities. And as fish, like any food, sits around, biological stuff happens in there. Proteins break down, fats oxidize, microbes grow. And as we've talked about before, a lot of these processes happen particularly quickly in fish. Now, I am not saying that your grocery store is selling fish that has gone bad, but I am saying that it may not be as fresh, quality-wise, as you might expect from something we literally call fresh. So now let's consider the journey of frozen fish to your store. To be clear, we are not talking fish sticks here. We are talking the fillets that come prepackaged, like this. This fish too was caught somewhere out on the water, probably abroad, but it was either frozen right there on the boat or by a processing facility soon after arriving on shore. And once you freeze fish, you pause most of that biological stuff that affects quality and safety. So the now frozen fish probably experienced a few days of that deterioration at most. But that's basically the best case scenario as far as the fresh fish. But wait, you're probably saying. You made an entire video on how freezing food damages it.
But that's
and
a flat,
right. Freezing food creates tiny ice daggers that poke holes in its cellular structure, which can affect the texture and cause moisture loss. But as we mentioned in that video, how you freeze food matters. The faster you freeze something, the smaller the daggers are, and the less damage they do. And today's fish freezing technology, whether it's on the boat or on land, is so fast and efficient that the damage it does to fish can be imperceptible. If that claim seems, well, fishy, let me prove it to you. Lots of people consider sushi to be the freshest, highest quality fish out there, but almost all of it is previously frozen. That is a law here in the US, and a common practice in a lot of other places, to lessen the risk of parasites. But you would never know it. At least I never did until making this video, because modern technology is so good at minimizing freeze-related damage. In fact, study after study after study after study, and I could keep going, suggests that under controlled conditions, consumers can't usually tell the difference between fish that's been frozen and fish that hasn't. And when people do have a preference, it's almost always for the frozen stuff. There are also ways to measure freshness quantitatively, like with spectroscopy, chemical analyses, and electrical conductivity. And here too, frozen fish tends to outperform so-called fresh fish, likely because those detrimental biological processes have been literally frozen so quickly after capture. This blew my mind. So, just for the halibut, I ran a few quick and admittedly not all that well-controlled experiments. And, as the science would suggest, my family could not reach a consensus on which was bought fresh and which was bought frozen. There's also the matter of sustainability. Think about the carbon footprint, or fin print, of never frozen fish, which generally has to be flown around in order to get to you while it's still in edible condition. Unfrozen fish is also way more likely to be thrown out. Researchers estimate that more than 20% of seafood at fish counters gets tossed because it doesn't sell in time. That kind of waste sucks, especially considering that the majority of the world's fisheries are overfished. We are basically depleting our oceans, then throwing away a big
20%, that's a big number, yeah.
And speaking of fish counters, you may have noticed that a lot of what's sold there is labeled previously frozen. This is fish that arrived frozen, but the store defrosted to make it seem more like the fresh fish that people want so badly. This is especially annoying, since that fish would have lasted way longer and been less likely to get thrown out if they had just kept it frozen. So if there is one takeaway here, it's that when you're shopping for fish, you should think beyond the fish counter and at least consider the freezer case as a legit option. Now, there are some ground rules for buying frozen fish. Look for clear packages so you can see what you're buying and to look for any possible packaging issues. And yes, all the plastic involved here does suck. But remember, frozen fish doesn't need to be flown around and is much less likely to be wasted. So even with all the plastic, it still ends up being a greener choice. Second, make sure fish is the only ingredient. Some manufacturers add a chemical named sodium tripolyphosphate to frozen seafood to help retain moisture, but it can mess with flavor and texture. And finally, not all types of fish freeze equally well. America's Test Kitchen warns that thinner fish, like flounder and sole, and firmer fish, like halibut, tilapia, snapper, and salmon, freeze better than thicker or flakier fish. Not all the research I came across seems to support this, but it's at least plausible that thinner fish freezes faster, remember, smaller crystals, and firmer fish contains less water, creating fewer crystals altogether.
Makes sense.
So look, if you can go buy fish fresh off the boat or dock, do it. If you have a trusted source of great fresh fish, use it. If something at the fish counter looks and smells good, buy it. But don't rule out frozen fish based on some outdated bias.
Yep.
It can be, without a trout, a fantastic choice. Now, my family doesn't just sit around taste testing fish. We also taste test everything that potential sponsors send us, and I am always wary about pre-made meals. But that changed when we tried Cook Unity, a chef-to-customer meal delivery service. That's why they are the sponsor of this video. The meals are really delicious. I would order every single week just for this spicy laksa wonton soup from Chef Nora Nolasco. You can choose from hundreds of dishes developed by award-winning chefs, including a lot of meals that I rarely, if ever, make at home. And right now, when my family is constantly on the move from work and school to baseball and basketball and art and music, Cook Unity is a lifesaver because we can sit down for a quick family dinner without spending really any time at all grocery shopping, meal prepping, or cleaning up afterwards. If you want to give Cook Unity a try, go to the link in the description now and get 50% off your first order of chef-made meals delivered fresh to your door. That is half off your first set of meals with code MINUTEFOOD50. Plus, you'll be supporting us, and that is equally awesome. Thanks to you and to Cook Unity.
Carnitas tamales. I never had tamales, but I know that is a big thing in the Mexican food. Whoop, no, the wrong. We went to the wrong place. Okay, anyway, just like I said on the beginning, basically frozen food is frozen pretty much straight away. Often, especially when it comes to fish and shellfish and stuff like that, it's often frozen on the ships that they're catching it. And frozen vegetables and fruits as well, like on the peak, that they picked when they actually ripe on the plants instead of being picked when they're not. I know that from experience because I did work in Spain picking tomatoes for a while, and those tomatoes were not ripe. This is why I don't really like the tomatoes, the cheapest tomatoes possible in supermarkets. They have no flavor whatsoever. So yeah, what do you think? Did you have that bias against frozen fish? Because I kind of did, but then I kind of started looking into it, like obviously hearing and reading and stuff like that, and actually the frozen fish is often like a bit cheaper, and the portions are kind of good too. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye!